Good evening, again. My name is Linda Ertis. I'm with the Arlington Public Schools staff, and I want to welcome and thank all of you for coming this evening. Tonight, as you know, or I hope you know, is one of 4 meetings we're going to be doing this week and next week. And the good news is if you've come tonight, you can check that box. You don't need to attend the others because they're all going to be the same meeting. Our purpose is to get everyone started in our process. In addition to the next 3 meetings, we have one this Saturday at 10 o'clock at Jefferson, which will be done in Spanish. Next Monday is at Yorktown High School, same time, but at Yorktown in the cafeteria. And then next Wednesday, same time, at Wakefield in the cafeteria. All of the information will be the same. In addition, tonight we are live streaming. As you know, we pushed out a message that we are live streaming to people who could not come to any of the meetings. And this video will be posted on YouTube or Vimeo, one of them. And the link will be available from the website so that if there's something you want us to come back to, you can actually enjoy it from the comfort of your home. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce our chair, Nancy Van Dorn, to say a few words on behalf of the board.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. I want to bring welcome and thanks for your participation from all of my colleagues. We really want to hear from you. We want to make sure that you have all the information you need to understand the process we're going through. We're engaging this because this school is overcrowded and we need to balance the enrollment in the 3 high schools, the 3 comprehensive high schools. That's the bottom line. And you'll hear more information from the staff. They can answer all of your questions. But I want to make sure you know that we're listening to you. There are no predetermined solutions here. We're really looking for feedback from the community. You'll have all of the tool, the boundary tool, the opportunity to send emails via the website. You know that we, board members, are available to you. You can email us, you can call us. Any emails that you share with us, we will also share with the staff, so we make sure that all the information comes together in one place. We have open office hours every Monday evening from 5 to 7. We're more than happy to talk with any of you at that time. Please know that we're available, and we really want to make sure this goes as smoothly as possible. So I'm really happy to see so many people here this evening. We're listening, and we're ready to engage in this process with you. So thank you very much for coming.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Sarah Johnson, and I am a consultant with APS, working with them on this high school boundary refinement process. I'm going to go through some of the housekeeping with you all before I turn it over to my colleagues. So I wanted to reiterate the purpose of tonight's meeting. It is specifically to talk about ways of reducing the overcrowding at Washington Lee by moving students to Wakefield or Yorktown. And this will also help to balance the 3 high schools. And again, as the evening goes on, my colleagues will tell you more about that as well. I wanted to also stress a couple of things for you. This is a boundary refinement and not a comprehensive boundary process. The reason why we're focused on the refinement is because we need to solve an immediate problem. If it was a comprehensive boundary-wide process, it would involve more students. So tonight we're going to talk to you about a few things. First, we're going to give you the context for the refinement. Why is it happening now, and who it will impact? Next, we're going to talk to you about some instructional considerations that we're looking at. We will also give you a demonstration of the online boundary tool. There are several ways for you to give us feedback, and the one we're going to share tonight is something that you can do on your computer. We're going to also have a question and answer section. As you came in, you were asked to sign in, and you were also asked to take an index card and a pencil. We know that a lot of you are going to have a lot of questions, and we won't have time to answer everyone. So there's basically 3 parts to the question and answer. The first part is, as we go through the presentation, if you would write a question on the index card and hold it up, someone from the staff will be going through the rows, and you can just pass along your index card. What we'll do is we'll take your cards, and while the presentation is ongoing, we'll categorize them. Some of you probably have very similar questions, so we'll condense the Q&A time by actually addressing some similar themed questions. The second is we will have some open mic time, so there will be 2 staff members who will be going through the audience and asking you to provide questions as well. Because there are so many people, we need you to ask very succinct questions. Again, if you have a follow-up to a question that you've asked, you can also write it on the index card and look at it that way. Finally, we're going to have table discussions. So we know that a number of you will need to have clarifying answers and ask more questions. And throughout the room, there are different tables that are labeled projections, data, other, and instruction. You can go to any of those tables, and there will be staff there who can actually talk to you and answer your questions about that. The last thing is before you leave, on the back wall, we have posted up a number of large sheets of paper. And on each sheet of paper is listed one of the criteria that is part of what the board considers in the boundary process. We've also put out sticky notes for you as well. So as you're getting ready to leave, if there are final thoughts you want to share, we ask that you write it on a sticky note and go ahead and put it up there. All of that information is being collected. So as we do our analysis and come back to you with feedback, we're going to make sure that we get a diverse way of capturing that information as well. The goal is to end by 8:30. And again, that will allow you 30 minutes at the end to have smaller group discussions and to talk to some of the staff who can give you more answers. And now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Stengel, who is our Director of Planning and Evaluation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a little taller. I'm going to stand back a bit. So tonight, I'm going to give you the context for why we're entering this conversation. On this map, what I'm showing you is what APS, the 3 comprehensive high schools enrollment would look like in 2020 if we do nothing. At this point, what we're seeing is we have more than 400 students at Washington Lee beyond the capacity. And then when you look at the 2 other high schools, Wakefield and Yorktown on the north and the south ends of the county, you'll see that there's almost 300 seats in those 2 combined schools. So if we spread the population out, we now can provide better services for all kids. The 2020 projections include our new seats that we're adding at Arlington Tech and the internal modifications that will create additional capacity at Wakefield and Yorktown in the summer of 2018. If you went on the tour earlier tonight, you probably saw some of the modifications that were done here already to use the existing space a little bit more wisely to make it more efficient. The 2020 projections include, I just said that. This boundary refinement process will recommend options for shifting some planning units from Washington Lee to Wakefield and Yorktown. Ideally, this process will impact about 100 students per year. That will start next fall and continue going forward. Essentially, we need to get those 400 kids by 2020 spread across the 3 comprehensive high schools. The goal of this boundary refinement process is to balance enrollment among the 3 high schools and to better utilize the available and planned instructional spaces. We have great schools, we need to use them. We're a county that's growing and we need to make sure that we're using our resources wisely. The change will take effect in September of 2017, and it applies to students who are currently enrolled in grade 8 and future freshman classes. It will not apply to our current high school students. The boundary refinements will be communicated in time for high school information night on December 12th. So we want to make sure that when families go to that night, they're getting the information on where their students will be going to high school. So it's important to mention that APS will likely revisit this in about 4 years. We're going to be adding 1,300 high school seats. Right now, we don't know exactly where. We don't know what that's going to look like. That's a lot more seats, so we need to probably go back and revisit this on a much wider scale next time around. That timeline will also have more time. We can do it 2 years in advance, and so we can build some more conversations into that process. So this is the map that we're talking about. It's important to note that this map is slightly different from the first one that was presented on September 22nd to the school board. The Facilities Advisory Council, which advises the school board on facilities issues, actually had recommended some of the outer boundaries get included last spring, and that was not recognized when we first put this together, so we've added that in. So this map shows in the little hatched areas the boundaries that we're proposing to include in this, that we're including in this process. First, if you know your high school colors, Yorktown is the Carolina blue up at the top, Wakefield is the green at the bottom, and then in the middle is Washington Lee. And all of the planning units along the outer edges are the ones that are shown here. So let me make this clear. These are possible options. At this point in time, we have not made any decisions. What you're coming here now is to help inform those decisions that we're going to make. So in the textured areas that we're showing here, there are 51 planning units under consideration. This is based on the September 30, 2016 membership. So last week, we reported out on membership to the board. There are 1,828 students in this group. We don't need to move all of them. We're moving about a fifth of those students. So we need to identify enough planning units to move about a fifth of the students. And again, we're talking about moving 100 students per year. So in November, the superintendent will be making recommendations to the school board. The recommendations will be based on the information that we gather from you participating in these processes, either online or in person or however you choose to participate. The recommendations will consider the APS boundary policy and the 6 criteria. It will also include provisions for students who have older siblings that will be enrolled concurrently with older siblings in the same high school, along with transportation provisions if it's needed for the sibling. So while I'm talking about the possible exception for sibling preference, I want to keep in mind how that could play out later on. We'll go back and do an analysis afterwards and add that into our factors, and we may need to move a little bit more students if we grandfather in a lot of people. As we begin to compile the feedback from the process, staff will keep listening to what you're sending in, and we'll be sharing that publicly as it's available. So the recommendations will take effect beginning September 2017, which is next fall. Again, it's going to apply to current grade 8 students, the incoming freshman class of 17-18, and to subsequent freshman classes. It's not going to apply to students who are already enrolled in high school. It will include options for siblings of current high school students, and it will be a part of the information that is communicated to our families at high school information night. So now what I'll do is turn it over to Tyrone Bird, who's going to talk about the impact instructionally.
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, everybody. Before I begin, could anybody who graduated from an Arlington County Public Schools raise your hand? Look at that, me too. All right. Went to Yorktown, went to Wakefield as well. Great schools in our school system. Just want to talk a little bit about the instructional choices that we have, or the instructional options that we have in our school. Arlington Public Schools is committed to providing all of our young people with the knowledge, the skills, and the confidence they will need to be successful in their generation and participate in and contribute to the global economy and society. The Department of Instruction is responsible for developing curriculum for every one of our schools. So it doesn't happen at the school level as much as it happens at the district level. We count heavily upon the teachers in each of our buildings to support that effort, but all the curriculum that our students engage has been developed at the district level. So there's really no difference between schools except for in the special areas. Students in each of our schools has access to the resources we believe are necessary for them to be successful as they work to achieve their academic, athletic, artistic, and social goals. Ooh, I'm in charge of this. There we go. The APS strategic goal was developed by a steering committee, which was comprised of 26 Arlington community members. The committee received input from more than 170 community organizations through various forums, surveys, and meetings. The committee identified these 5 goals and many related strategies, desired outcomes, and indicators which drive our continuous improvement efforts across all schools and administrative departments for the benefit of all students. Again, this drives everything we do at every school across our county. All of our students are working towards successful completion of the credit requirements to earn either a standard or advanced diploma, regardless of the school that they attend. Our course offerings are articulated in what we call the program of studies, and it provides a rigorous challenge for all of our students. Each high school student has access to opportunities to enroll in college preparatory courses, which is evidenced by our consistent high rankings in the Washington Post Challenge Index, which, if you know, is a challenge index is a score of number of college level tests given, which is then divided by the number of graduates that year. Each APS school has earned full accreditation from the Virginia Department of Education. APS believes that every child deserves a highly qualified educator, regardless of race, ethnicity, income, or the neighborhood that they live in. We know that there is a clear correlation between student achievement and teacher quality, which is why we work diligently to recruit, retain, and develop highly qualified educators for each of our schools. No Child Left Behind requires that all of our teachers of core academic subjects be highly qualified, which federal law defines as a teacher who is fully licensed, has a bachelor's degree, and has demonstrated competency in each subject they teach. And as you can see, across Arlington County, our teachers are in great position with regard to being highly qualified. And then lastly, the Virginia Department of Education is currently working to redesign our high schools for the 21st century, not in a physical way necessarily, but in the way we provide instruction for our children. In the very near future, we will have new expectations for high school graduates and changes in the way credits are earned for graduation. We will have a greater emphasis on hands-on learning, early college courses, and industry credentials while maintaining highly rigorous standards. We will have opportunities to earn academic credit for previously earned certifications as well. So this is an exciting time to be a student and educator in Arlington Public Schools. I've had the great fortune of being an educator here, an assistant principal here, a football coach here before moving to Falls Church to be a principal for a while, and now I'm back home. I'm excited about the work we have to do, and I love each and every one of our schools. As I said earlier, I attended Wakefield and Yorktown, and I know them each to be exceptional places to teach and learn. So I'm excited about this conversation, and I hope you are as well. Thanks for being here tonight. Oh, who am I inviting next? Okay, come on up.
I'm back. So a lot of people want to know how they can participate, and there are a number of ways. When you came in, you probably picked up a one-page flyer, and that flyer contains a lot of information. It contains contact information about how to send us more feedback, and you can do that by email or by leaving us a message on our hotline. Additionally, we are going out and having meetings with people as requested. And one of the aspects of the refinement process a lot of you are interested in is the online boundary tool. And so what we're going to do now is show you a brief video about how the tool works and how you can actually access the tool.
Welcome to the APS High School Boundary Refinement process. Your feedback and suggestions during this process are very important, and we appreciate your participation. This video will walk you through the steps to use the APS High School Online Boundary Tool. Let's begin. Go to www.apsva.us/APS Boundaries to get started. Click on High School Online Boundary Tool. This link will be available until October 24th. Choose your preferred language. For the purpose of this video, I'll click English. Make sure you take time to read the instructions for using the tool on the right-hand side of your screen. Remember, the goal is to effectively balance enrollment among Washington Lee, Yorktown, and Wakefield high schools by the start of the 2020-21 school year. Scroll down, and once you have finished reading the instructions, click Next. Don't worry about remembering everything. There will be helpful reminders along the way. Now let's get to work. First, let's take a look at what's on your screen. The map on the left side of the screen represents the current high school boundaries. The stars represent where each of the 3 APS comprehensive high schools are located. Yorktown is in blue, Washington Lee is in light red, and Wakefield is in green. The 51 planning units in brighter red are the units that you may choose to relocate into another high school attendance zone. Click on a planning unit to see more information about that planning unit, including the planet unit number, its current attendance zone, the number of students eligible to move in the next 4 years, and the attendance zone to which it is eligible to be transferred. Let's look at the right side of the screen. From here, you can toggle the walk zones on or off, as well as the elementary and middle school boundaries to better inform your decision. The sidebar provides student enrollment information and capacity percentage at each school. Ideally, enrollment, especially in the 2020 school year, should be between 90% and 110% capacity after you are finished adjusting the boundaries. A green bar, which is achieved when the capacity percentage is in the 90% to 110% range, indicates that the enrollment numbers are acceptable. A yellow bar indicates that the enrollment is too low, and a red bar indicates that the enrollment is too high. A quick reminder, the current planning unit borders cannot be changed. Also, you can only move an active planning unit into a new school attendance zone if it is directly adjacent to another planning unit already in that school attendance zone. Continue to make various planning unit changes until you have reached a scenario that you believe most effectively balances enrollment. Remember, the goal is to effectively balance the enrollment for the 2020 to 2021 school year. As you work with the tool, you'll notice the color bars that indicate each school's student enrollment will fluctuate based on your decisions. When you're satisfied with your map and are ready to submit it to APS, click Next. This page shows you the net change of student population for school years 2017 through 2020 based on your boundary adjustments, as well as which planning units you moved out of the Washington Lee attendance zone. The system will automatically generate an image of this page as part of your submission. APS staff will compile all of the responses, and this community feedback will be used to develop boundary refinement recommendations for the school board. Click Next. Last page. To finalize your submission, you just need to respond to this short list of questions. If you don't know your planning unit number, click here, and a new tab will open to a county map that allows you to input your address and determine your planning unit number. The next question asks if you have any children attending APS. If yes, click here and you'll be asked to provide which grade level your children are in. The next question asks which criteria had the most impact on your decision. You may choose up to 3. These criteria are from the APS School Board Boundary Policy. If you click Other, there will be a space for you to provide additional information. Here, you can give us any additional comments about the tool, the process, or anything you'd like the staff to consider about high school boundaries. Here, you can provide suggestions for sibling considerations. And here's the most important part. Don't forget to click Submit when you're finished. And that's it. Thanks so much for your participation. If you have any questions, please contact us at apsboundaries@apsva.us or 703-228-6310. We look forward to hearing from you.
We good? One thing I want to clarify, as many of you may have discovered earlier today, this video is already posted on the APS Boundaries page. I know it's hard to see in here because of the lights and the screen, so feel free at any time during this process to watch the boundary video again, or you can move forward to a certain piece of it if you need a clearer explanation. Secondly, we are recording the same video in Spanish tomorrow, and that will be posted, if not by the end of day tomorrow, early Friday morning, so that both options will be available. And now I'm going to turn it back to Sarah.
Hi. So we've received a number of your index cards, and so what we're going to do is each of the presenters and 2 additional folks, Lionel White, who is the Director of Facilities Operations, and John Chadwick, who's an Assistant Superintendent. Each of them has a number of index cards. They will each answer one card at a time, and then they'll just basically do a round robin. So we're going to get through as many cards as we can. Lisa?
All right, so one of these questions is, has projected and planned economic development residential in South Arlington over the next 5 to 10 years been considered in the Wakefield planning enrollment? Yes. So last year I helped with a community facility study, and we actually had external consultants take a look at our projections process. And as they went through it, our projections process, they validated what we do now, and in that pipeline of what we project, of what is projected by facilities, includes the development pipeline. I apologize, I have a hard time seeing sometimes. So has the building of a new 4th high school been discussed? Where might it be placed? And is this a timeline? Is this the timeline? So there will be a new high school. I don't know if it's determined officially yet. I do know that when the CIP process was being discussed last spring, that one mention was that they could repurpose where the current ed center is next door and possibly put it there. I don't think that decision's been made. There will be 1,300 seats. I have another question in here that actually asks, this will be disruptive if we have to do this again 4 years from now. One of the things I learned on the community facility study that I think is important, we are growing as a community, and we're projected to grow as a community to I think 240,000 over the next 20 years. We're gonna get more and more kids. So this is not going away. Next year, we're gonna have to look at elementary and middle school boundary. And middle school is gonna probably affect most of the county. Elementary could affect a large proportion of the county. This is probably gonna be a little bit more normal than we've ever experienced before, because this is such a great place to send our kids to school. My kids went here. I know a lot of you have kids in here. It's a good experience, and people move here for the schools. But we want to make sure that you understand this is probably going to be our new normal for a bit.
Hello there. The question that I have is, what is the student density within each planning unit? All right. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so the tool will tell us each year if there's a projection of how many students reside in the planning unit. So essentially that is how many students. So that's, I believe that's the density that you're probably referring to. And if it isn't, we can chat after in our breakout. The second part is, will planning units be 100% moved or partial? Right now, the tool is set up to be 100% moved, just to be clear. All right. Two more. Okay. Next, let's see. We have a question. Why have the light pink planning units been excluded from further or any consideration in this boundary proposal? Okay, so those planning units are not a part of the reassignment. The planning units that are moving, or slated to move, are currently in Washington Lee. If you recall looking at the map earlier, the projection for 2020 is that Washington Lee would have a surplus of 400 students. So given that logic and that knowledge, we would need to move students out of Washington Lee to the other schools that, according to the projections, have seats available. So that's why you see sort of a move out of Washington Lee, and that's why the other planning units weren't in play to go into Washington Lee. Again, we can... Oh, the center planning. Oh, well, yeah, it's not on the edge of the boundary. I'm sorry, I apologize. It's not on the edge of the boundary. It would have been nice if I'd have had that map up. What's that? Some of the planning units that we're not considering are further from the school. That's correct. So the goal is to reassign planning units that are at the outer edges of the Washington Lee boundaries. Those planning units that are closest to Washington Lee, that are more than likely within the walk zone, aren't slated to move.
Can we stop? I mean, this is not.
Yeah. We can talk about it in the.
We can talk about
Yeah.
it in the smaller groups.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You've got walkers moving and not people who are on buses. At least be considered for a move.
Right. Again, we'll get into this in greater detail in the breakout, but we'll have another speaker that has other questions. All right, who's next with questions? John, come up.
Okay. So just to clarify again, so we know that you all have a lot of questions. They're important to you. One is we wanted to go through the questions we've gotten on the cards. We will be coming through the audience with microphones and then having smaller group discussions. So you're not going to be able, it's not that we don't want to answer your question, we're going to take it in various formats. So again, you will have a chance to ask your questions.
I'm going to actually answer the question on walkability. As you go through looking at the tool and weighing in what you feel, that's one of the criteria you should use. It's a reasonable criteria. You'll see the school board had the 6 that we put up there. That's one of the things that you can weigh in on. There's lots of different factors you could put it on depending on where you're coming from and what your primary concerns are. We've heard from a lot of you, so use that. It's the decision that our superintendent's going to have to make a recommendation to the school board. It's not easy. So just to let you know, use that when you weigh in. So data transparency, the data that we do collect from this, we will make it transparent. We're working with the FAC, number one, to look at how do we process all this information. This is a fairly quick process to get a lot of data and figure out how to use it. So we're meeting with the Facilities Advisory Committee next week and talking about how we'll sort of come up with what are the options that we're seeing from all of the different inputs. We've given you probably 4 or 5 different ways to weigh in tonight. We're going to use all that information as we process it. We will put it online as we get it to a point where we can share it. We'll come back, I think it's on the 27th, is what we heard. That's a meeting that we'll also televise it, but we will actually come back and say, here's what we got from all of these different discussions and share with you the options that have sort of bubbled up to the top. What are sort of the best scenarios we've come up with? So sibling preference, somebody said to describe that. So we've got different cases on this, and depending how it is, we need to make some decisions. If you currently have somebody who's a 10th grader at Washington Lee, and you're in a planning unit that potentially could move, it may not make sense for your family to have your kids at 2 different high schools. So we're going to consider that, and we want you to weigh in on that when you're giving us your feedback. You know, if you have 2 kids at the same high school, we want to make sure that we're allowing to provide transportation too, if also it's needed. The other piece is, if you're going to have kids in the same high school for the next 12 years because you've got 6 kids, and do we allow you to continue to do that if you're going to have kids concurrently enrolled for the next 6 years? So there's some balances there. Somebody else?
Hi, okay, I've gotten lots of questions about IB. I'm not going to be able to answer all of them. I'll just kind of touch on a few. Why aren't academic excellence or structural success considered as criteria for boundary drawing process? Given the discrepancies between the schools, shouldn't there be a priority on maximizing enrollment at the better performing schools? We believe that each of our schools can be successful with the student population that we have across our county. The challenges that we see mimic the challenges that schools see across our nation with regard to ethnicities, social economic status. All sorts of variables come into play when you start talking about how well students do on standardized assessments. We believe we have the skills and the resources at the instructional level to support all of our children in being successful. If you look carefully at the data that we produce with regard to how students do on standardized assessments, whether it be SOLs, ACTs, SATs, you see that the common populations do well at all of our schools, or those who struggle across our schools. So there's work we need to do as a community to improve those results. But I I would hate to believe that there is a thought that some of our schools experience those difficulties because of the faculty or staff that are in those buildings. There are other things at play. With regard to IB and whether or not IB will move from Washington and Lee, there are no plans currently for us to move IB from this school. The community years ago decided that IB was the focus of this community, interested in having that here. When we were a smaller community, it was easier for us to do that and to bring students from across the county to come in and experience that. This is not an IB program, it's an IB school, and it permeates everything they do in the building. So just picking it up and moving it someplace else is not going to be able to be done without great expense to us as a community. So there's a lot of things involved in that. I'll turn it over to someone else, and I'll look for another question.
Okay, so the next question is, does the boundary tool allow us to recommend moving units without dots? The answer is it does, but you can't do it actually in the tool. Once you put together your boundary proposal, towards the end, there'll be a feedback form box for you to put in your comments about suggesting areas that are not in the dots that they be given consideration. Staff will read the feedback and, of course, give it consideration. John?
Good evening, everyone. I have a question here. You've all been very busy. There are a lot of questions here. Given there are only 2 weeks for community input, it feels like APS knows what it wants, and this is more of a box-checking exercise to demonstrate APS is being transparent and doing the Arlington way. Please help us understand that this is not the case. I think I've been working at Arlington Public Schools for about 5.5 years now, and just about every process that we've been through, somebody has said that, or more than one person has said that. You know, you've really made up your minds what to do. And I can tell you honestly that there have been times during those processes when I thought, well, this seems like this is the solution we need to go with. But until we got to the end, honestly, we did not have a plan in mind. We did not really know what was the best thing to do, and we really needed the community's input as we do now. The reason this seems rushed is and I don't really think it is rushed, but we have high school information night, which comes up in December 12th. That's a very important night for many families, and we feel that those families absolutely have to know what their options are and what their neighborhood school is by that date. And we weren't able to start this process till the beginning of the school year, obviously, because people weren't around, and we can't do things in the summer and make it look like we're doing things while everybody's out of town. I'm responsible for the buses as well, and so there's a question here about buses. Arlington Public Schools has a bus shortage. Are they considering keeping all walkers at Washington Lee and the same at the other high schools? So yes, we absolutely don't want to have to add any more buses than we have to. We would prefer not to turn students from walkers into bus riders. We hope that won't be possible, and we're giving you this tool to use to show you how creative you can be in making that work for all of us. Next question. What do you say to homeowners like myself who specifically bought a house to be in the Washington Lee District, not Wakefield High School? I really can't say very much about that, other than that sometimes I wish that real estate brokers in Arlington would point out to people that this is a growing community and things will change over time. The other thing I would say is that all our high schools are fabulous, and they all have different things to offer, and we're proud of all of them. Here's another one. Why not make choice voluntary? That is, why not make Wakefield competitive in quality, so we want to go there? I would defer to my colleague Ty Bird, who is Director of Secondary Education, but I think he would argue very strongly that all three schools are equally strong academically. Thank you.
And to add on that, I think Ty already said this earlier, but Arlington Public Schools, high schools, if you follow the Washington Post Challenge Index, all 3 of our high schools have been on the top for the region for the last 15 years. We are the only school district in the region that can say that. So, one of the questions was, how does Arlington Public Schools control for multiple entries from the same individual or family? We understand that people are going to use it more than once. We can see if 50 comes in from the same computer. We'll be able to see that, obviously, and that will be taken into consideration. But on the other hand, I spoke with a woman earlier this evening who said, I tried one and I think it's okay, but I have a different idea in mind too. And so we welcome that. I mean, we want as many ideas as possible. One of the things, as you saw, that we were asking what planning unit you are in, and asking you to identify that so we can see what areas are making what recommendations. The second one we have is, why are we doing this before negotiations are over the Ed Center at Washington Lee are finished? Won't that potentially add hundreds of seats to Washington Lee? Well, there are 2 parts to that answer. First of all, no decision has been made about what is going to happen at the Education Center, and the assumption is not that what happens at that site is Washington Lee space. It could be something totally different for the entire community. It could be, lots of options are being looked at right now, but that's going to be a long conversation with long times to make the decision, probably over the next 2 to 3 years. We can't, if you looked at the map, wait 2 to 3 years. We need to provide relief to Washington Lee now. And what we're looking at doing to do that is moving out approximately 100 students a year over the next 4 years to do that. Otherwise, we have to take up all of the fields here with relocatables, and that's just not a practical solution. The last thing I will add with that is a reminder that on the map, there are 51 planning units that you can choose from. You don't, obviously not all 51 are going to move, and so we're looking at you to tell us which ones you think should move. In those 51 planning units, there are 1,800 students over the next 4 years. Only 400 or so need to be moved. So what we're looking for from the community is, tell us what makes the most sense. Because we're struggling with the decisions just like you, but we know that decisions need to be made. The last is, why is it necessary to make the change in the fall of 2017? And again, that's because it's not getting better each year. It's only getting more difficult to manage. So we need to make some decisions now and then make some decisions again in the future.
Okay, I have a question that says, how do students who apply for the IB program but drop out fit into the equation? Do these students typically get to stay at WNL even if they aren't doing IB, assuming they live outside of the WNL zone? So yes, this comes up quite frequently. Students who come here on a transfer are expected to enroll in a certain number of IB courses beginning their 10th grade year. They have to take 1 IB class that year. They call it pre-IB, but it's not really pre-IB. But there are courses that prepare you for the challenge of being an IB diploma candidate. If you fail to maintain that level of engagement in IB, you are asked to go back to you're compelled to go back to your neighborhood school. That's something that happens through my office, as a matter of fact. And then there's a question here, is why aren't you providing more information about the characteristics and strengths of each school? I would love to be able to do that. I was told I had 7 minutes this evening to speak with you about certain things instructionally. So I would love to have that conversation with you. Again, as I'm becoming more of a student of each of the schools, I'm learning about the wonderful things that take place in each of our buildings. So I'd love to engage in that conversation, but unfortunately this evening is not the time for that. They've asked, would you consider minimizing or eliminating IB training transfers into W&L. Would this solve approximately 50 people per year? Possibly. But when we opened up the IB school here, we said we were going to make this available for students across the county. So while there is a cap, I'm not exactly sure what the cap is, but there is a cap. We would like to continue to offer IB to students throughout our county. So that is not necessarily being considered at this time. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to answer two questions that are actually sort of similar. So one person said, 2 years ago, Yorktown High School was projected to have overcrowding by 2018. How will this boundary refinement address that problem? Actually, when you look at the boundary tool, what you're going to see is what the projections are. So when you're balancing at the different schools, you're going to see what's happening at those schools in those next 4 years. The second part of this actually is, to what extent will the current process account for the long-term seat deficit projected for Wakefield and the surplus at Yorktown? So really, somebody's asking questions that we're grappling with. Wakefield is projected to be over capacity in the future, but we chose for this boundary refinement to look through 2020 because 1,300 seats are going to come online in 2022. So we need to reconsider things at that point, making those decisions about a school that we don't know where it's going to be and what the program's going to be. Is it going to be like an HB Woodlawn kind of alternative program, or is it going to be something like a comprehensive high school? We can't make boundary decisions if we don't know what the building is going to house. So we will revisit it. So while what you will see in the boundary tool actually reflects the boundaries and the enrollment through 2020.
Okay, this is about stability. With a broader boundary change on the horizon, is there potential for planning units to be moved away from Washington Lee and now, then away from their new school later? So let me tell you where we are on this. As you know, we do 10-year projections, and they'll come out probably around Thanksgiving time for the new year based on our September 30th numbers. They're much more accurate in the first 5 or so years than they are in the next 5 years or last 5 years. When we analyzed all the data and presented it to the school board earlier this year, we found that, in fact, to balance enrollment between the 3 high schools by 2020, based on the projections we had, we needed to do what this process is about, is actually spreading the students equally, some to Washington Lee, and then, some to Wakefield, and then some to Yorktown. But when we looked at the numbers we saw for 10 years, which of course are far less accurate because there are much more, there's much more development on those to be done, and we have to wait, 5 years, then they'll be more accurate. It actually showed that we should be moving them all to Yorktown. So it is conceivable that we may be moving some students now or planning units now, and they may move again in the future. I think, as somebody said earlier, Arlington is growing dramatically. I think it was 3.6% this year. That's huge for a school district. We really don't know when it's going to end, and we don't know what the overall numbers are going to be. So we all have to remain flexible and expect that boundary changes will continue, and there'll be a natural way of doing things. Does it really matter what we say or how we participate? I hear from conflicting comments that the staff already made their decision. Please clarify. I said it before, no, we have not made our decision. We really do want you to use the tool. We really do want you to submit your proposals for how to make this work. And we really will analyze everything that we're hearing before we make recommendations to the superintendent. Thank you.
Okay, I have one more question. What will school population numbers be at each school in 2017 post-boundary changes? Just to explain the tool, when you first open the tool, if you click Next, then there are bars on the right-hand side of the screen. Those bars tell you what the enrollment is at the schools post-enrollment. So actually you can see that from 2017 through 2020, just to be clear, that information is currently available on the tool.
So this question has 2 parts, but I think it's important. So what alternatives to this boundary change have been considered? There was a consideration not to do anything, and to let Washington Lee, and I think if we go back on the slides where we showed you, you would have 400 additional students at Washington Lee and 2 other schools with empty seats, seats for students that we're not using. The other thing I want to mention, because I have friends in other districts, what they do is they raise class sizes. So that was not a consideration in this. We value our class sizes here. We have a real strong belief in what kids should be experiencing in schools. And so we're not using some options that other places use, and I think that's important to also remember.
Okay, I have 2 more. And the first one was, would we see if some students would like to voluntarily move? And that's available right now through transfers to Wakefield and Yorktown. So that won't go away. And that has been in place, but it hasn't been enough to solve the problem. But that will continue. The second is, how are we getting input from families who don't have computers? And also a very good question, the session that is on Saturday in Spanish, and we're also reaching out to a number of the community organizations, the Mongolian Community Center, the Ethiopian Community Center, and a number of others to reach out. There is a paper version of the boundary tool that we have available and will be showing families how to use. We're also planning on reaching out to the bilingual resource assistants in the schools so that they are aware of this and can help families that may need to do and share their ideas. And they can tally and so forth. It's basically a paper version of what you will be doing online to recommend what units they would like to move. At this point, are we good? Okay, we know that there are a ton more questions, and we're not going to be able to get to all of these here. What we are going to do is, a lot of your questions were very similar, and we're going to put them together. If you've checked out the website, there's a list of frequently asked questions. And on those, we will continue to add to those questions. So through the process, check in there periodically and see if things at the very top of the page, it says updated on with the date. So you don't have to go all the way to the bottom. You can look and see, has anything been updated? And we'll be adding it to that list. Do you want to explain where the different areas are now? Because now we're going to split so that if you have a specific question about IB or the instructional program, we'll have instructional staff. If you have, you want to do, Mike, you ready? Okay, we can do a couple minutes of that. Okay. So I have, and we're going to do the microphones because we are live streaming it so we catch it. Over here. Okay.
Okay, a couple things. Thank you for your time. So far we've been talked to about getting to know the new normal. I would submit to you, everybody in this room has a student that's been in a trailer. So we're all fully aware of what the new normal is. So we're not students here, okay? We've also been told about how much the county's growing. Where's John? John, we've had this conversation for more than 4 years. So we're fully aware of it. So a couple questions. The IB program, how many kids are enrolled in IB in the school? Am I sure?
Can you go up to the mic?
Okay, I hope you have that answer. Because there's obviously consistency in the room here about the consistency of the 3 schools.
There are currently 73 diploma seniors and 72 diploma candidate juniors. There are about 500 juniors and seniors who take 1 or more IB classes.
Okay, so that's a very big number. So we talked about the investment that it was done in this school to do the IB program. If we want the 3 high schools to be consistent, which seems pretty passionate about all of us, I want to know what that investment can be in all 3 schools so we're not spreading children out. That's only going to make the 3 schools better. It's only going to make the 3 student bodies better. That seems pretty obvious to me. I'm not as educated as you guys are at this, but I want to know what can be done about that before you start moving people around. Because that's a bigger number than 437, what you just said. So the second thing is, that graph has been on everybody's radar since probably 2011, when my kids went to grade school at Glebe. And they also went through 4 trailers of Glebe, and right now at Swanson, I don't have to tell you guys how many are there right now. So we can't even park a car because of that. I'm sure we're not the only schools that are dealing with that. So my concern overriding all this is what's taking so long. You guys had that diagram 5 years ago, unless you're not looking at the data, and I know you're looking at the data. And I would also like to have an update on the Wilson School and what's going on with that.
So,
I know I gave you a lot, but
No,
I
that's
think I'm
okay.
speaking for a lot of people in this room.
so let me answer that question as best I can. As you know, the school board adopts a capital improvement plan, CIP, every 2 years. In seeing the growth that was coming, and in seeing that it actually started out in the elementary schools and then went to the middle schools, and as we're seeing now, is going to the high schools. In the 2012 CIP, the school board addressed elementary seats. In the 2014 CIP, the school board addressed middle school seats. And now in this one, we're addressing high school seats.
Okay, John, addressing them, I don't know how they've been addressed yet.
So, well, I can tell you, we've built Discovery Elementary School for
Okay,
630 students. We've done additions at Ashlawn, or just wrapping up one at McKinley. We have another one at Abingdon. I don't have the numbers all at my fingertips. We've done a lot of that. The Stratford building will be completed in 2019 as a new middle school. And as part of that, it can't become a new middle school unless the H.B. Woodlawn and Stratford programs have moved to the new building on the Wilson site, which is also scheduled to be completed in 2019, along with the new elementary school at the Jefferson site.
Okay. I just think the CIP, I've heard you say before, I'm not an expert on county government, but give us a chance to vote on it more than every other year. Let us make that decision. Why can't that start happening every year? And why does it have to be every other year? Things are moving too slowly for our children.
I'm afraid that's too big a question for me to answer now.
Before you get to that, I'm going to just clarify a few things as well. The total number that I shared, the 500 students who are taking an IB class, some of those students live in this community, obviously. What I'm hearing from Mr. DeMagistris now is that the current freshman class was allowed 55 transfer slots. So this current freshman class has 55 transfers in. 58 were allowed because there were some twins, and there was some allowance of a family member, a sibling attending as well.
My question specifically has to do with our use of the boundary tool, and one of the, I think, 6 criteria has to do with demographics. One of maybe the greatest strength of Washington Lee is the diversity that it has within its student body, and you guys have provided through a link some of the data on the specific demographic information for different planning units. Are we to assume that besides WNL, but also that the current demographic breakdown by race and ethnicity, also free and reduced lunch, at the 2 other schools is considered satisfactory to APS? So if we were to use the tool resulting in really no change in the demographics at, say, Yorktown or at Wakefield, the APS would find that acceptable? Or does APS want those 2 schools to become more diverse than they currently are? So is keeping the same is okay or not?
That's not what we're looking for. We're looking really for the community to help us figure out what are those priorities and how they weigh in. So you saw the 6 criteria. It is the 6 criteria we're looking at, and we need help. How do we weigh those things, and how do we make it work?
I think I'm next. Hi. I'm Kate. Yeah, I was just about to do that, actually. I'm Kate Vance Lake. I have 2 kids, one who graduated from Wakefield and one who's a senior at Wakefield this year. We live near Yorktown, and they went through the Spanish immersion program, starting at Key, Gunston, and then into Wakefield. We are thrilled with Wakefield. That's one thing I just want to say. It is an amazing school with an amazing principal and amazing teachers who go to the moon and back for our kids. And I just want to tell you, it is what people told me when my kids were in elementary school. It was Arlington's best kept secret. And you know what? It's not about to be a secret anymore. So just think about that, okay? My question, though, is, my question is, have you given any thought to alternative programming with the hands-on curriculum that's coming? We had Governor McAuliffe at Wakefield last spring sign into law this requirement in high school that high school kids have a year-long experiential learning, which we have had at Wakefield for many, many years, senior project. And, I would love for us to think of another way to get the kids into the community, doing internships and community service that would get them out of the seats into the community, which would give them really good real-world experience. We have so many options in this area for kids to get into and get involved with. It would also hit on the assets. Some of the assets that look at community, the relationship between our kids and the community, and how our kids feel the community views them and values them. So I just sort of feel like it's a win-win for the crowding issue, getting kids out of the seats into the community, giving them real-world experience, also giving them that hands-on curriculum that we're talking about that's coming.
I don't think I can do much better than what she just did. That's absolutely where we're going. She's hit the nail on the head. The Virginia Department of Education and the Arlington County, the Arlington Public School Board is working in that direction already. There are already experiential learnings going on at each of our high school settings. Washington, Wakefield has one that you described as a senior experience. As the senior project, there's a senior experience here at Washington and Lee. So they're all doing that. And as we move forward with the redesign of high school, there will be more opportunities for students to earn credits outside of the traditional setting and in the workplace. So we will absolutely be coming for each of you to invite a student or two into your place of business so that they can learn the workplace readiness skills in real time. So hopefully we'll be able to do that in the very near future. And that is for all of our high schools, not just for one or two. Each year we reevaluate our program of studies, which informs families and students of the course offerings that are available to them. You should see the number of CTE offerings that are going to be added this next school year. They're just, Chris Martini and his staff has been working amazingly to really provide options for our students across the district.
Great. Hi, everyone. I have a question really about the IB program again, and just wondering if you guys have considered or thought about how you'll handle the potential influx of transfer IB applications, because if you're planning to move, these 100 kids, and you have folks that would have come here and would have had the IB as part of their neighborhood school, now have to consider putting an IB transfer application, the number of 50 transfers that you have might go up. Sounds like you are in the low 70s in terms of candidates accepted. Mm-hmm. So if you've got qualified candidates that would have automatically been eligible, how are you going to handle that? Have you guys considered that?
The number fluctuates each year depending on the number of seniors who graduate and those who transferred in. So if a senior who transferred in graduates, and then we can accept another student, and that number fluctuates. Some years there's 20, some years they're 50. So each year we'll have to reevaluate the number that we can accept in. The first priority goes to students who live in that school district, the school boundaries. So those students are allowed in, and then based upon how many there are, then that helps us determine how many IB students we can accept as transfer students.
And how would you make that? So let's say you can only accept 20, but you have 70 more applications.
There's a lottery process that is utilized.
So it's sort of now become a little unfair, right? To some of the kids that were in that, like the Jefferson kids, essentially, is what we're talking about.
Yeah, the process has been established, and we'll continue to use it, as far as I know.
Hi, I'd like to just address the Yorktown boundary, the non-contiguous unit, the island over here to the right. Not one word's been said about that. And my kid who comes here, but via the IB program, it's a walking school for her. It's 1.5 miles. Her home school is Yorktown, which is 4 miles away. Wakefield is 4.7 miles away. That whole island there just doesn't make sense anymore. Since no better way to say this or nicer way to say this, but the lower population that was in that area has been priced out.
That's my old neighborhood. I know. I've lived actually in many of the boundaries that, one side of the street Yorktown, one side of the street's Washington Lee.
But why wouldn't those be considered in this moving area? At least
because
for consideration.
We don't need to move kids out of Yorktown. So those are Yorktown kids. But maybe your option would be to move the kids in between to Yorktown. Because right now we have those kids going through neighborhoods, and they, that could be one of the contiguous things. I don't know. Again, this is why we're putting that decision back to you. This was a historical decision that we're now We have in our,
to deal with,
we have
yeah.
today, so this is the challenge that we're facing.
Well, these kids from that unit, from that planning area, their after-school activities are, they just come home. You know, unless they're active in sports, they come home, they're in the neighborhood, they're away from their friends. There's just other reasons to maybe change that around.
Okay, somebody over here.
Hi. First, thanks to all of you for being here and making yourselves available, and thanks to the rest of my fellow community members. It's nice to know that everybody's so engaged in this, frankly. I have a question about the 6 criteria, and if we could have our AV folks put it up, it may be helpful. Just so that we're all, because we're going to use this tool and we all want to be speaking with the same language, could you help us with some context? I mean, we all understand what these words mean, but it's important to know what the words mean in the context in which APS is actually using them. So what's efficiency mean in the context of this exercise, right? What's contiguity mean in the context of this exercise? Can you help with that?
Actually, I don't want to tell you right now, but on the boundary tool, it's defined, and the definitions are very clear. I mean, proximity is pretty easy to explain. It's, you know, within a certain distance. Stability is not making the same kids change boundaries multiple times in multiple processes, but they're all explained there, and it's explained in a nice, concise way.
So we're all going to be using the exact same definition
Everybody,
all the time?
yes. And actually, I want to mention that when you fill out that tool and you submit your responses, one of the questions on the end that we're asking you is which of these decisions weighed in your proposal. We want to know that. We want to see what we're getting as sort of the aggregate from everybody and which ones are really playing out the most. 2 more questions.
Hi, I'm Beth Ellis. I have 4 kids that have gone through the system. One's in college, 2 still in high school at Washington Lee, and 1 coming up. First, I wanted clarification on the projections, because I heard one gentleman say that the new 10-year projections are coming out this December. Is that correct?
Okay, so the boundary tool uses the most current projections in place, which are last fall's projections. The projections are updated annually. We just got the September 30 enrollment on September 30th. The new projections will likely be available in November, probably early to mid-November.
Okay, because I guess I misunderstood. I thought I heard someone say something about the 10-year projections, and the new one's going to be coming out this December.
Yes, let me explain. So each year we do a 10-year projection. And so last year we did one, and we're using last year's projection for 2016 to inform the tool, because we have not had a chance yet to prepare projections for this school year.
Okay, so the second part of my question is, my son, who's now second year in college, was a kindergartner at Ashlon, and I remember going to my first PTA meeting there, and they gave us their projections that they were going to close Ashlon next year because the projections were showing, you know, the population is moving, but so I really don't have faith in these projections, and I hate making these decisions, huge decisions that are affecting all of us, and very emotionally for a lot of us. Okay. So I'm glad you clarified the first part, but the second part, it's still, I just wanted to voice my opinion that the projections are not always what they seem.
Yes, if I could just say one thing. In terms of the projections, there was a time when APS enrollment wasn't growing very fast. It actually slowed down, and I want to say it was maybe around 2005, 2007. I don't know if your child came along in that time period, but there was a slowdown, and then in 2008, enrollment took off. So we've been in a high growth pattern since 2008. 2 years ago, just to give you some perspective, normal school systems, if you grow 2% a year, that's considered high growth. 2 years ago, we grew 5.2% in 1 year. This current school year, we grew 3.6% in 1 year. So we're in an extremely high growth pattern. Just to give you some perspective, this year we grew 900 plus students year over year. That's the equivalent of more than an elementary school. So when we have this type of growth coming each year, that's why we're sort of stressed. Our facilities are stressed. That's the reason why, is that we're in an extremely high growth pattern.
So The projections for this year were 99.5% accurate. They were really tight. You know, the other piece I want to mention is the students you're going to see in the boundary tool, I don't know how to do that, are kids who we currently have in middle and elementary school. So it's not the other projections. I mean, it really does reflect the students that we have now. So while they're projections, it's based on our actual student data that we have and the kids that we're working with now.
All right, we done the last one? Yes. Okay. This is the last question, and then we'll break into the small groups and answer questions.
Two.
We have, oh, I'm sorry, two. One here, and then one here.
Okay.
So we'll go
Mine
ahead.
is kind of a technical question, actually. I'd just like to have some more clarity on exactly what the output is of this boundary tool that we'll be experimenting with. Like do you get a big spreadsheet and you'll look at the frequency with which, all of us have selected, zone 4606 to go to Wakefield, and that's like how you're gonna make a decision? I hear you telling us that you're hearing us, but what is the most effective way for us really to, what's the most salient way? What's going to have the most weight? And, are we just playing with this thing or what?
You're playing with it and looking to see what the options are. And like you heard earlier, somebody may go in and come up with something better the second time around. It's not a vote. Again, those responses that you provide on the back end are things that we're going to be using as we start to see who's making decisions based on those criteria, what you're telling us about sibling preference. I work in the office, we do evaluations. We're going to take this and figure out how to analyze the data and come back with all of the different venues of data sources that we're providing so that it really is not, the tool is not the end-all be-all. It's all of these other pieces. As we're hearing from you in these conversations, we want to make sure this is included. So I really put your time in, and also send us an email if there's something in there that doesn't get responded to through that, or if there are other concerns.
Good evening, everyone. So my concern is everybody doesn't want to move to other areas, schools. Like she said, Wakefield is a great school, and I think there are great instructors there. So I think the overall problem is what's causing us as parents not to want to go to that particular school. I think we lack a lot of parent attention to their students at other schools, and that's what's causing people not wanting to send their kids there. Because I know, for me, Wakefield is a great school. It has great instruction, it has great teachers. However, their parents are not involved with their kids. A lot has to do with that, too. And I think that's something that has to be addressed. What are you guys doing with these teenagers that are not focused on their education or their instruction? And I think that's going to help, too, with the school system. That's something that I'm concerned with, where the parents are not pushing their kids to be in school and move forward.
All right, okay, I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Johnson. It's about 8:15, and we said we were going to try to do an hour and a half. So I'm going to ask her, Dr. Johnson, to explain what we're doing from here.
Great. So I wanted to make sure that you see what the rest of the timeline is like for this process. Again, after the boundary tool will close on October the 24th, that is not the last time that you give input. On November the 27th, we will be coming back to Washington Lee to have a meeting that we're calling What We Heard. At that time, we're going to share with you the community feedback that we've actually received. There should also be a number of recommendations that have been created. You will then be able to discuss with us those recommendations and what you think about them. After that as well, there are a number of ways that you can actually weigh in with the school board as well. Again, listed are a number of meetings that the school board is having. On November the 15th is a public hearing. So that's another time for you to be able to go out and actually share what you think. Right now, what we're going to do, one, we have over 100 cards, which is great. And so what we're going to do is start typing them up and add it into our FAQs. And as Linda said earlier, we're actually going to put dates next to them so you can see when they've actually been updated, which is good. I mean, granted, we didn't get a lot of people to do the mic time, but we've got a lot of valuable information we've collected. At this point in time, we're going to ask you, if you're interested, to go to a table for small talk discussion. Straight back, under the, I guess, the food sign, says something that says instruction, and that's where Ty will be. To the right of that, there's a section called Other, which means it's not instruction. To the front, there is one that's called Data and one that's called Projections, and that's where you can talk to Lisa, Lionel, and John. One last thing, before you leave, we really want to get your feedback on the criteria. So at the back right, there is a table full of stickies and pencils as well. If you want to go ahead and write some of your comments, your thoughts on the criteria, and then just stick them to the corresponding board, that would be great.
The
Yes.
criteria is on there.
Yes, the definition of the criteria are on there.
The
And once
definition
again,
of the criteria are on there, and as well as other stickies to put up about instruction or other issues.
thank you for coming.
My ambassador.